Hello, this is Mary Collins, a female New Mexican's political point of view. And today on the show, we have Baker Stetson, who's running for Supreme Court Justice. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Our first question is, tell us a little bit about your family. How long have you been here? Are you married? Do you have children? That kind of thing.
Well, I was not born here. I was actually born in New York City, and it still shows. But I got here, as I say, I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I can. In fact, I've been here almost 40 years. My father died while I was in school here. I got my PhD in New Mexico at UNM and my law degree here. And while I was getting my PhD, my father died at a pretty young age, and so my mother and my aunt by marriage and her children and my mother's children all moved out here.
Oh.
Most of us remain here. My aunt and her oldest son remain here. My mother is here, and 3 of us in my family are here. One sister moved back to New York because her husband works for the New Yorker. He's a cartoonist at the New Yorker. It was kind of important she moved back. So we've been here a long time, are very much a part of the community, although different communities. One of my sisters is an artist, has been here, married a fellow from Velarde. And one of my other sisters also married here, had a child here, and works in the tribal school systems as a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, she's 89 years old, and she probably wouldn't be very happy if I were telling this to people publicly, but she's 89 years old, and I will say that she, as well as my sisters, we've all been active Democrats, and my mother was working for the Obama campaign last year, and was putting, or not last year, 4 years ago, and was putting up signs and slipped and fell and broke her hip, and had to go to the hospital and have an operation. It made me run and get an absentee ballot so she could sign it before they knocked her out, because she wanted to make sure to be voting for him in case she didn't come out of the operation okay. So we're here, we're involved politically, we're involved professionally. It's a very close family, and it's all women.
Mm-hmm. Well, nothing wrong with that.
No.
As a matter of fact, you are the owner of a female and Native American owned law firm. So tell us a little about your college education and your history as a lawyer.
Well, I actually have a long education. I got my bachelor's degree at Vassar College in the 60s, and a master's degree then from Brown University in the creative writing department. Then I came to New Mexico in the early 1970s, got a PhD in American Studies, and then decided to go to law school to become a tribal attorney. When I got out and was practicing law, back in those days, it was in the late 70s, early 80s, it was a little harder than it is now for women to get jobs. I had to write 3 times to get a job with the man I wanted to get to, and it was difficult in its own way, but I felt it was important to have that apprenticeship time to learn my trade. But I found that he didn't want to hire tribal attorneys, Native people, and I did. And so after 4 years working for him, I went out and started my own firm with a Comanche man, attorney, and then we were soon joined by a Sioux woman and then a Southern Cheyenne man. So we had an Indian-owned, woman-owned law firm starting in 1986, which actually went on to become very quickly nationally known. And the partners in that firm have, for the most part, distinguished themselves tremendously, both politically and in their personal lives and professional lives. This current firm that I'm in is just owned by me, just a woman. And the reason for that is because when people started realizing how wonderful my partners were, they started making them take appointments in Washington, D.C. And one of them went on to become Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, and the other was the founding director of the National Museum for the American Indian. And so they kind of started leaving. And at that point, I started my own firm in '97.
You're an AV certified attorney. What does that mean, and how important is that in this race when it comes to your credentials as a lawyer?
Well, the Martindale-Hubbell ratings are independent, unbiased, anonymous ratings by other attorneys and judges, and basically look at various areas of legal work: your experience, your ability to communicate, etc., your ethics. You're supposed to technically work up from a no rating to a C rating, then a B rating, and A rating. The theory being that by the time you've really distinguished yourself or had an opportunity to distinguish yourself as an attorney, that it should be recognized, and will be, because your peers and judges would have had exposure to you. The AV rating is the highest rating you can get. The Republican candidate, or at least the person we expect to be the Republican candidate, Paul Kennedy, has an AV rating. Most of the Democratic candidates for the Supreme Court position do not have an AV rating. And I've had my AV rating for 26 years. In fact, got it after only a few years of practicing law, 5, I think. It usually takes 10, 20 years. And Martindale-Hubbell told me they thought that was a record at the time. But indeed, I have been AV rated for 26 years. I think it's important because this is our top court. It's supposed to have our best lawyers. And why would you want to put up a B or C or an unrated attorney when you can put up an AV-rated attorney? I think it's important in that sense.
Mm-hmm. The court makes rules for lower court judges. You have experience with the ethics and how valuable that is. Do you feel that the court rules should be reviewed on a regular basis to give all judges the opportunity to understand them and to express their opinion?
You're talking about the ethical rules that apply to judges in general?
That, along with the new political rules, yes.
Okay, that apply, but they apply to judges, not rules